Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, a program we haven't talked much lately about on the recruiting trail. The Ohio State Buckeyes, I think, have the biggest official visit weekend that they will have in the entire month of June, starting June 9th, heading through the weekend. And yes, you have your number one commit of your 2024 class and Jeremiah Smith coming to Columbus, but I want to talk about specifically this offensive tackle position that Ohio State, for the fans, they haven't had much to complain about in terms of recruiting. I mean, Ryan Day and that staff have done a phenomenal job filling this team with talent, and you might have some gripes with maybe falling short on the field, but in the recruiting trail, they have been one of the best teams in the entire country. But one position that they haven't really nailed the last couple of years has been that offensive tackle position, and you take a look at who they have coming in. This is kind of why I think it might be the biggest weekend they have in the month of June. Now, before we get into it again, I just want to say thank you to you guys. Y'all know I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to recruiting. I like to read about it, like to talk about it, and the support you guys have shown, chopping it up in the comment section, has been absolutely awesome. So, again, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. I can't thank you guys enough for all of the support. And the college football community that we've kind of been able to build, it's special. And if you're watching recruiting videos early June, you're probably about it. So again, appreciate you guys. If you do enjoy it, consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get into it. And let's talk about Jeremiah Smith first. I know Ohio State fans probably a little frustrated with the social media taking all these visits when you say you're committed to the Ohio State Buckeyes. And I think a lot of fans really get it. I think you see some of those crazy, I wouldn't say crazy, but some of the real passionate fans on Twitter kind of calling him out. Most of us kind of understand that when you're a top commit like Jeremiah Smith, who really has an argument to be the number one player in this class. Like Dylan Riley is the quarterback of the class, but Jeremiah Smith, from a pure talent standpoint, from like a future Hall of Famer standpoint, Jeremiah Smith's probably the most talented prospect in this class. And when you are of that caliber, you're going to take your official visits. You're going to take the visits. And it comes down to wanting to make sure he makes the right decision. You know, Florida's been in it. You know, Georgia's been in it. For me, this is just an opportunity for Brian Hartline, Ryan Day to get Jeremiah Smith back on Ohio State's campus and kind of solidify that commitment up. And we've talked about the potential of the flip. It's so hard to flip a top wide receiver from Ohio State purely because of the track record. Like, you go back and look at the development at this wide receiver position, just going off the top of my head the last couple of years, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Jackson Smith-Njigba. You're going to have 2 first-round picks in Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. in the 2024 NFL draft. It's, at this point, kind of like what Alabama did in the past or Georgia has done with the defensive line. If you want to become a first-round NFL draft pick at the wide receiver position, you go to Columbus. And so Jeremiah Smith, although taking his visits, I think we'll be wearing an Ohio State helmet when it's time for him to play college football. And this official visit kind of just gives Ohio State the opportunity to really lock that in. And I think when you get a quarterback like Aaron Nolan, who many think is one of the best quarterbacks in this class, I do start thinking it's going to be really hard to take Jeremiah Smith away from Ohio State. Now, what I want to talk about a little bit more is some of the other guys that they have, and particularly on the line of scrimmage and at that offensive tackle spot. And you look back at the 2023 class and the 2022 class and even the 2021 class to an extent, Ohio State hasn't really landed their number one offensive tackle on their board, which is something you can't really say. Ohio State normally, they get their guys. If they have a top guy who's on top of their board, they're normally getting him. Justin Fry has come in, and I'm not saying he's doing a bad job by any means, but it's been that position that the recruiting hasn't been great on since a guy like Paris Johnson in that 2020 class, who obviously was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, a phenomenal offensive tackle for Ohio State. But since then, it hasn't been great. And Ohio State this weekend has the opportunity to really make an impression on some of these top offensive tackles, particularly out of the state of Ohio. I mean, it's just been they get the number one tackle in the state of Ohio, and I've actually listened to shout out Buckeyes. They do a phenomenal job kind of covering Ohio State recruiting. And when I dug deeper into it, I kind of see that. And I think this weekend allows Ohio State a really good opportunity to go after and maybe kind of take the inside track on the recruitment of some of these best tackles. Brandon Baker, the first guy, he's the number one offensive tackle in the class from modern day. When you can get a kid, and Oregon and USC, probably the two front runners for this recruitment, but you get him on campus, you get him around a guy like Jeremiah Smith, I think you could get some traction there. But I think Ohio State, which is, again, it is rare to say that Ohio State has a position group that they haven't recruited at an elite level, right? The quarterback spot, they have the wide receiver, the running back, plethora of spots on the defense. This Ohio State program gets to top talent. At that offensive tackle spot in the last couple cycles, they haven't really gotten. And you look at their depth chart and why they had to maybe kind of pivot to Joshua Simmons in the transfer portal was the talent at the offensive tackle spot really wasn't there. And I think it was largely as a result of kind of missing and losing out on some of the recruiting battles in the 2021 and 2022 class. And so getting back to getting those top tackles that are top dudes on your board is going to be big. And the next guy, Brandon Baker, is one that I don't know if Ohio State's going to win that one. I think Oregon's in the lead, and they have some real good history with developing tackles. Gerby Lambert, though, a top 50 national recruit, the number 3 tackle, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. That seems like a winnable recruiting battle. You take a look at who's in the lead for him. You have Boston College, Notre Dame, and Penn State. Those are kind of the teams that have been thrown around with him. That if Ohio State wants to turn the heat up on a guy like Gerby Lambert, who's from Massachusetts, that seemingly would make a lot of sense. And maybe you're battling the hometown Boston College. But it does seem that if Ohio State and the banner of Ohio State wants to turn up the heat on someone like Gerby Lambert when it's coming against Boston College or Notre Dame, I do think Ohio State could potentially put them in a spot to really win that recruitment. The next position group I kind of want to talk about is that defensive line. And you go down the list and you have the Armstrong brothers already locked in, but going back to that tackle spot, and one more point I want to make, and that's not a shot at a guy like Deontay or Devontae Armstrong, who are very good prospects, but those guys are, they're not in the top 200 for a reason. And Ohio State is normally used to getting a guy to the position group who's a top 50, a top 100 national prospect. And at that offensive tackle spot, they really haven't been able to do that. And the Armstrong brothers could be good tackles at the Big Ten level, but there's a reason Paris Johnson was a top 10 pick nationally. He was an All-American tackle. He was also a top 10 recruit coming out of high school in 2020. And so that's kind of why I'm highlighting so much this Brandon Baker and Gerby Lambert recruitment. Now, another opportunity they have is to kind of get some more size on that defensive line, which in the defensive line, they've done a phenomenal job getting guys, developing guys, but it has, like, they went out and got Tywan Malone from Ole Miss because I don't think they had that size. This weekend represents a chance for them to kind of get some of those really big dudes that when you're playing Penn State, when you're playing Michigan, and they're going to run the football and go heavy on you, you have some guys to match up personnel-wise. Jaden Jackson from IMG, you see the national ranks outside the top 600. I'll tell you what, on these Power 5 boards, Georgia offered him, Alabama wants him, Ohio State wants him, Miami wants him. Jaden Jackson on the boards of these scouting departments at the college level is a lot higher than the 673rd national prospect. And Dontre Robinson, a guy that is seemingly leaning Florida, but 6'4", 300 pounds already as a rising senior. Another guy that is a beefy dude that I think would help Ohio State in terms of, hey, if we need to go heavier when we're playing a team like Penn State or Michigan that wants to get physical and run the football, we have some personnel and guys to be able to handle that a little bit better. Now, before we do close it out, I do want to shout out another guy who's not slated to take an official visit in the month of June, but Ohio State has a lot of traction with, is Jordan Seaton. And it gets back to recruiting outside the state of Ohio and winning these recruiting battles for these top tackles nationally. Jordan Seaton on the composite, the number 2 tackle in the class from IMG Academy. You see Ohio State really trending in that recruitment. It sounds like I'm kind of being picky, but I think when you want to win a national championship and so much of your offense has to deal with protecting your quarterback, recruiting the offensive tackle position is going to be vital for Ohio State. And that's probably the position group that they've kind of fallen short with in terms of talent acquisition in the last couple cycles. So this weekend, maybe not the most star-studded group, although it does have a guy like Jeremiah Smith. That's not really the reason why I'm highlighting this Ohio State official visit weekend. It's to get the tackles like Brandon Baker and Gerby Lambert into the fold, because that is a position that Ohio State just has struggled with in the last 2 cycles. So, yes, locking up Jeremiah Smith and kind of reaffirming that commitment is big. Don't get me wrong with that. But getting these top offensive tackles from the national ranks is also a massive, massive priority for Justin Fry and the Ohio State Buckeyes. So something to keep an eye on. Wanted to hop on and talk about just someone other than Jeremiah Smith and Aaron Nolan for this Ohio State class. Again, appreciate you guys checking the fellas out. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.